Our next presentation is about the testing and cleaning, what have you, that we can do with our sewer system. I met Tom Woods at the Illinois Municipal League Conference last September. He was one of the exhibitors there. And we started talking then about the type of work that his company does and what we can do to learn about the actual condition of our sewer systems. Tom was gracious enough to take some time and meet with me after the conference and sit down and talk a little bit more specifically about our sewer system. I had a number of questions about how this works, and I'm very anxious for you guys to be able to hear what Business Sewer does and how this can impact our village. So with that, I'd like to introduce Tom Woods and take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Judy. Thanks for being here. I promise not to be an hour like Mr. Long-Winded, but I'd be willing, be more than happy to. Business Sewer, I'm sorry, I got hit my center button. We are we call ourselves a sewer rehab firm. We're based in Milwaukee with a shop that you can see up there at Broadview and Joliet, and Minneapolis, and northern Iowa. We're an upper Midwest firm. And about half of what we do is the cleaning and televising that we're going to talk about today. The other half, in a dollar sense, what we do is we fix some of the things that those cameras found, either directly through the municipality or structured through an engineering firm who's got a program on the street, or structured through a general contractor who's hired to fix the streets and we'll work for him. But we've got to clean and televise ahead of time, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And we can fix some of the things without digging some of the time. And we're just, please stick up your hand. What the hell are you talking about? We do not have, my frustration is we do not have the history in Broadview. That was great that Ralph had that history in Broadview because it was very meaningful to you guys. We have a history of working all over the place, but never specifically in Broadview. And you'll see why in a second. The bullets up there are very straightforward, very obvious. This is why you should clean and inspect. Clean your sewers, put a camera in your sewers. Sometimes you clean and don't put a camera in. Rarely do you televise without cleaning because you can't physically get the camera through sometimes. So it's a philosophical thing at some point.
Tom, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you talking about deep cleaning or just clean, like when you go and, surface clean or getting down and doing
You are dropping a high-power jet hose in that line, down the manhole, down the line, and pulling crap out of the line into the next manhole, and you're sucking it back out, or you're bucketing it back out, or you're putting a screen to catch it, and the guy is physically going down in there and pulling that out. Depends on what your philosophy is, depends on how dirty it is, depends on how big it is. And we're going to show a lot of pictures of that. It might be big enough, you're inside there.
So it's real thorough.
It should be a real thorough clean.
Okay.
Because I appreciate what you're saying. Sometimes you clean your oven, and then sometimes you do that, what do you call that deep clean stuff that smells up the house for it.
That's what I want to.
But the whole point of this is, can you say basement backups? That's why you clean your sewers. That's why you put a camera in there, to know that you've cleaned your sewers, in order to avoid that. You're not doing it because you just have excess money to spend. You're trying to keep, did I just knock something? You're trying to keep that water where it's supposed to be, which is in the system and not in your basement, period.
And I just wanted to point out that you're looking at these, but we're still looking at the same screen.
I forgot to do that, but sorry. I try not to look at that. That's what I meant to say. That's why you're cleaning and televising sewer. My bad. And it's all of that is basically backups is driving that train. The collection system is what you call the series of pipes that are handling your storm and your sanitary sewer. Everybody knows the separation there, right? Sanitary is when you flush the toilet, take a shower, goes into the sanitary system. When it rains, it goes into the storm system. Here in Broadview and many other collar communities, it's about split between there's 75,000 feet of sanitary sewer. There's about 75 or 78,000 feet of what the industry calls combined sewers, which means the storm and the sanitary are running into the same line. And there's another 40 or 50,000 feet of storm sewer, separate storm sewer. In an ideal world, there is no combined sewer. You have sanitary sewers, and you know how to handle them, and you've got the capacity to handle, and you have storm sewers. But they didn't do that in whatever, when a lot of these lines were put in. The city of Chicago has very little separated sewer. Virtually all of it is combined sewer. And the main problem from your brain point of view is if you're trying to have the capacity of those sewers to be able to allow you to flush the toilet, take a shower, and do all the things that are just your normal life, and then it rains like crazy for 3 days and that pipe is full, you can't flush the toilet anymore. And that's where the problems come in. That's why the deep tunnel's built, to drop that water quickly away and hold on to it until we can convey it. So, my little pointer was broken, but those are all the possibilities how water can get into a system. Your roof drains might be connected in. Shouldn't be. By code, most of the time they're not supposed to be anymore, but they often are. Your sump pump or your foundation drain shouldn't be. By code, they're not supposed to be. Into the sanitary, they're supposed to be into the storm or out up to the ground. There's a lot of places where you can have, which is, the point of that is that's why you investigate what you've got. That's why you stick cameras in the lines and figure out what you've got so that you know ahead of time. I don't want to make you experts, and that's the fear I'm going to have is that I'm going to sound like I'm trying to make you an expert at running a jet truck or an expert, but it's important to understand what's going on. Clay tile is a vast majority of what you guys have in town, I'm quite certain. I don't know that for sure, but I'm quite certain. Clay tile is a great product, except when it's not. It's a great product for the impact of the actual material itself on it. It doesn't wear very well, but it's fairly brittle. As the industry developed, it used to be made in 2 foot, and then 3 foot, and then 4 foot, and then 6 foot chunks. And every time you have one that has to be joined to another, which has to be joined to another, you have joints that are issues. You have possibilities of things going wrong, and that leads to some of the problems that we have. Brick and mortar. There's some great pictures I have in here. It's cool to see an old brick sewer when it's done right by craftsmen. It's just remarkable, and it's the mortar that breaks away. It's usually not the bricks. Concrete, you can see what's going on there. Storm sewer is almost always concrete. Back in the day, there's some plastic now. Plastic, Ralph was talking about PVC or polyethylene or HDPE, different kinds of plastic. They're great today, but they're not in the ground in history. Steel or corrugated metal pipe, that's the wavy stuff that you see running under as a storm carrier. It tends to rust away eventually. That's the problem with that. And then ignore that last one for the second one because we'll come back to that on the winding point of view. Okay.
The question. Can you say what H2S is?
Yeah, hydrogen sulfide. Sorry, hydrogen sulfide. It's the byproduct of sewage doing its thing, doing its degradation, breaking down the junk that's in that system. And if water's not flowing, or if water's flowing and dropping and spinning around, it releases H2S gas. And that's a corrosive element on all of your system. A lot of what we do when we do that rehab part that I told you about, it's because of H2S. It's because it's a natural byproduct of the sewage that it's handling. There's just nothing you can do about it. All right, so source 101, just real quick, we just talked about the combined storm and sanitary. Typically, there's 300 feet between manholes. We care because we're going to drop that jet hose in that we were talking about, and then we got to come down here 300 feet later to do it. If it was every 1,000 feet, you'd be pulling a lot of water or pulling a lot of debris. So generally speaking, 200, 300, 400 feet apart of the manholes, up and down everybody's systems. The pipes are sloped. I don't need to be obvious about it, but the pipes are sloped. Sometimes the pipes are laid poorly and they're not sloped and it doesn't flow very well and the H2S builds up, or it just doesn't flow, or a blockage happens because it's not flowing. So it's designed correctly and laid correctly. It's flowing from point A to point B. And it gets on the end of the block, it's an 8-inch pipe, and by the middle of the block, it's 2 blocks later, it's a 10-inch pipe, and then it's a 15-inch pipe, and then it gets to real big, and then it drops into the MWRD. That's just kind of real basic house. We did a job at Franklin Park. It was done backwards. It was done the opposite. They went from big to small. We don't know. The guy
What's the MWR?
Metro, it actually should say with a GC on it. That's the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. GC, Greater Chicago. And 99% of what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes is not the individual sewer lines, kind of like Ralph didn't talk much about the individual water lines. The most of what we do, the most of what you guys are concerned about from spending municipal money is the main lines. I don't know what your code is, you can tell me. Most municipalities own the main line, and they don't own any of this individual line going up. Maybe the connection, but in a ownership sense, maybe you guys could answer that for me. You own the main line? Yeah.
I thought it was sidewalk.
It could be. There's some it's the right of way, there's sidewalk to the property line. The point is, if you got a problem at your house, you're not going to call the municipality, you're going to call a plumber who's going to clear that out for you. If the main line's got a problem, it's going to become your problem, but it's their problem. She's going to look it up. We talk about sewer maintenance a lot, but it goes hand in hand with inspection. And I kind of said that backwards. A lot of times we think visualizing sewers, putting a camera in the sewer. We tend to talk about televising, but you can improve your system and go a little bit cheaper and maybe do a little bit more for the same dollar by only cleaning. So I kind of separated here for a few minutes: cleaning sewers and televising sewers. That makes sense the way I said it. How come a system gets dirty? Did I hit that? That's right. And I got about 4 more I thought of after I wrote that slide. Roots, clearly a potential big issue, particularly with those clay tile lines that have small segments and there's a lot of joints in the great old trees that go find water. Where do they find water? They find water in a separated joint right in where it's wet, because that sewer line is wet. Roots are a big issue. The older the community, the worse they are potentially a problem. We might get called in to give an estimate what's it going to cost me to clean and televise X amount of our sewer line. One of the things I do is walk up and down the street or drive up and down the street and see if the sewer line has trees above it. As soon as it has trees above it, I know our job to clean it is going to take longer. Therefore, it's going to cost a little more. Any clue what FOG means? Fuck. It's a big problem in a lot of communities that the residents don't know about because it's more commercial than anything. Fats, oils, and grease. Solidified fat. So I was at a presentation not too long ago where they talked with it was the Fox River Water Reclamation District out in Oswego, and they have a woman there whose whole responsibility is pre-treatment to keep that from entering their system. And she had the most disgusting pictures I've seen in a long time. Because restaurants, when they finish they're washing their dishes, it's all supposed to go through a series of grease traps, and then before it gets into the sanitary line, and hire grease people to clean out these grease traps and keep it out of the system. Then if you, however, are doing the same thing with your fryer at home, and you're dumping it in, it's just me. It doesn't matter at all. And you run a little hot water down there for a while. It's just like, oh, come on, let's make it freeze. Who cares? Well, it's going to be a collapse. It hits a blockage, it hits a 90 degree, and it sets up and solidifies, and it's tough to get out. It's tough for us to get out, and the sewer cleaning firm is tough for anybody to get out. But so I promise your municipality will start. Now that you know that, you'll hear FOG programs. As I said, more commercial, more retail. Better said, more retail with restaurants and food service places than anything else. And I don't really go well enough to know if there's a lot of that or a small amount of that. Storm debris in a combined sewer. Remember we said that the combined sewer has stormwater and sanitary, and then stormwater comes in through those open curb grates, and little kids love to throw stuff in there, and leaves get in there, and they sit in there, and now it's a potential source of how it got dirty. Older lines, the bedding settles, and the joint opens up, and stuff falls in there. The water main breaks the fall, or that Ralph was talking about, and the active flow will make that water fall in there. I mean, make the dirt fall in because the water's going to pull the dirt into it. That's how it can get dirty. Flat out collapses, just bad pipe. If flat out collapses, we'll show up and see a few pictures of those. Holes in the pipe. Ralph described it perfect. That was a great example. I'm going to use that for later. And then, my note here to myself is that little blockages become big blockages. It's just completely logical. You got something in the system that's hanging up and not flowing smoothly, and something else hits it. You see it in a creek where a tree goes down the creek on a flooded situation, goes up against the abutment, and now forms a little bit bigger, and then you keep going, and pretty soon it's a big blockage. Cleaning the sewer is keeping the blockages out. It's not to make the pipes pretty and sparkly. It's to keep stuff flowing. As Ralph said, to flow where it's supposed to go. To the sewer plant, to the MWRD line, or to the storm creek outfall. How often should a municipality clean their sewers? It depends on what kind of money you have. There's no other way to say it.
You talking about jetting?
I'm talking about jetting. I'm talking about jetting the lines. Our recommendation is, did I hit the right one? Yes. That a municipality try very hard to get 20% of their total pipes clean, 20% clean every year. In other words, the whole diamond thing is done in 5 years, and then you start out with the 6th year, you start back on the first 20%. A lot of communities do it that way. A lot of communities don't. It's 10% a year. And so somewhere in between is, there's no absolute, you're going to have a problem if you don't do it this way, you're going to get not if you don't do it this way. Problem areas, of course, more often, as Ralph was referring to, the water guys, the sewer guys know where their problem areas are. They're out there every month, every day, every week. A lot of the times, municipalities, we don't know what kind of program they have because they don't hire outside contractors to do it. You don't have many people doing their own leak detection, but you do have a lot of communities that do their own sewer cleaning. I don't know if it's as good as contractors who do it 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's not probably as productive, but they're definitely there for the oh my God parts. There's no question about that.
So, okay, I just want you to explain that again, because I think that's, as far as I'm concerned as a resident, that's critical. The deepness and thoroughness of a cleaning depends on what, I mean, your company does it where, I mean, like, it's like everything's cleaned out of there, squeaky clean.
I would say, yes. I'm not going to go out and eat on that bite.
No, but I understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just saying.
It's absolutely right. It's squeaky clean because then your problems, the backups are going to come from temporary occurrences or fluke occurrences or collapses in a piece of pipe. They're not coming because of ordinary preventable blockages. That's what I'm referring to. You're trying to do it in a preventive sense. And whether you can afford to do it 20% or 25% a year or only 10, pick up a program and be consistent about it. Get it done, put it in the budget, if it's your own manpower, which I don't think it is in Broadview. It is. Okay. I wasn't sure, but I knew that. If it's your own manpower, then be consistent. And every public works guys I talk to say, do we have the time? Because we're also plowing snow sometimes, and we're also cleaning the leaves out of the catch basin, so at least the stormwater drains off the street. And they're doing the public works rule, and nobody has enough staff. We're doing a lot of work for Franklin Park these days because one of their operators, of a small staff to begin with, one of their operators, he decided it was time to retire. He was 82. And he was the guy that was running a big sucker truck, we call it. And so he retired, and so but they still got to get the work done. So they're frustrated, they don't have the manpower. So they're hiring us a couple times a month, 2 or 3 days a month we spend doing that, being their department, and then we go away. And then they be their department. The 82, that cracked me up. It's like, did that answer your question?
Yes, I wanted to make sure that was clear because that's why I asked the question about when you explain what you mean by cleaning.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about jetting, but is that what that means? Jetting means cleaning everything thoroughly like that. Okay.
There's really no other way to clean a line if it's big enough to get a person in there, that you have some options. But you can't clean a line by putting a chemical in there and letting things dissolve and gold magically go. You can't clean a line by pushing an expandable plug in and pulling it through and pulling it. You need to use 2,000 pounds of water to flush that stuff out. I brought I had a small one here. I didn't realize we had clean ones in the shop, and I found them. This is a jet head. That is the stylized up there. These are hokey pictures that I have here, but this is a jet head, a small little jet head that is attached to a 1-inch hose, which is attached to a 1,000-foot reel, which is attached to a truck that has 1,000 gallons on it, with a pump to be able to produce total 2,000 PSI, 2,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. And as the water is heading here, there's all these little jets, and I'm going to pass this around. It's kind of cool. These little jets here where the water shoots out going backwards at a 30-degree angle. As the water goes down, as the water pressure forces that down that way, these jets are coming backwards and they're hitting the edges of the wall and they're scouring it, for lack of a better way to say it. There's a zillion versions of this kind of a nozzle. This is a very basic one. These little ports are replaceable when they wear out. You put other ones in. You take this, so when you put a different head, you got a bigger pipe, and it's a bigger head because you need a bigger spray because you got to get bigger out there than 360 degrees. But it's all the same. It's all the same technology. You're letting water pressure push that thing down and spray the water backwards to clean the pipe. That's what jetting is. There's rodding, which is poking holes through the mechanical things, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But when I say cleaning sewer, that's what I'm talking about.
Is the jetting, the 5-year year, is that because of that power that's going into those pipes? If we don't have good quality pipes that can...
You got little bumps every joint. You got a bump because of a joint. And there's something to catch up. A little bitty thing catches up once a beat. Remarkable what our guys find in sewers when people put down the toilet, for God's sake. I mean, it's just disgusting to talk about it. It's true. Let alone what can get in there from the nature of storm sewers and all that. So you're catching, you get a little bit of a hang up, and then it becomes worse, and 5 years later, you get more of it. And it just builds and builds and builds. The other thing that these jetter nozzles can do, you can take this plug out and put a different little port in it, and you can we call it penetrating nozzle. You can blast your way through blockages as well as scouring backwards. Not that thing, kind of cool.
I just wanted to confirm, since our mayor has set that in. Mayor Jones, is this what we currently do now for the village? And it's basically how this is spread?
They've got a set schedule for the jetting line right now. We started that 2 years ago.
So some kind of regular basis, trying to get X amount done.
X amount done per quarter.
Yeah.
And I don't know what his exact schedule is over there, but I do know he has a rotating schedule, and they do weather permitting.
Yeah, the weather part is, the main thing about weather, besides the fact that it pulls the guys off doing and solving other problems.
Right.
The only reason that you could not jet 365 days a year is in the cold months. You got water, you're dealing with water, and if the truck is out, it's 10 degrees or 0 degrees, and you got this big tank of water and all these hoses, you tend to stay in the shop on those days because you're fighting against. You're not getting anywhere.
You're not getting, it's just a waste of time.
That's your productivity wise, you're not getting. A jet truck is one thing, and we call it a sucker truck or a combination jet vac truck. It is the same principle, the jet on the front end, but you're also, instead of capturing the debris and physically pulling it out of the hand, you're capturing the debris at the manhole and sucking it up and out of there. Broadview, do you have any of these sucker trucks?
I don't know if they got that exact sucker truck, but they had the thing retrofitted. You had to get up the work company to tell you that.
Right.
They had that
We used to have one of those.
Yeah, they got rid of it. Right, they got rid of it. Yeah, right.
And what we use now,
It's lower scale.
Yeah, that's right.
So that has a certain type of vacuum of intensity to get all the junk up with.
Well, you can pull out small
Right.
boulders. I mean, it's a big hunk of concrete, you guys are gonna go down and get it.
Right.
You can pull out small boulders.
Okay.
And then it collects in the back there and separates the water and the junk out. If it's a storm water, you have a lot of places you can take it. And if it's storm debris, you can take that to, sometimes if we're doing a job for Public Works like we do in Franklin Park, they have a spot, if we're cleaning their storm sewer, they have a spot where we go dump that truck. Otherwise, we have to take it to a landfill and charge them $65 a ton, and that's just money you don't need to spend. Sanitary, a little different. It's got to go into a sanitary, into a treatment plant system of some sort.
Okay. Now, you also said that you can go physically get a guy down in there and take it out, but you can only take out the stuff that you can't get through that vacuum. Is that what you said?
Sometimes either you can't afford or you don't have available a sucker truck, you physically got to take it out by hand. Because there's no sense, if you're cleaning that section, there's no sense in just sending it to that section and we're done.
Right, I understand. I just was curious as to how, you know.
Yeah, every once in a while, yes, it's a big piece of debris that the guy found, and he goes and gets down in there and gets it. Most of the time, you don't have the sucker truck out there, so you gotta clean it by hand. But there's all sorts of tools to do for work from above, like a big version of those doggy boomer scooper things. You got a big version of that you can grab stuff with. You put a basket down there behind the line that's about to head to the next section and catch it in that basket. And guys don't go to the hole any more than they have to.
I understand.
But from our perspective, when we send a crew out, or if you've hired us to send a crew out, it costs another $100 an hour for that truck versus that truck. So maybe it's not necessary. Maybe we can catch it. Maybe there's not enough debris in there that we don't need to, or you don't need to do it for that. Last thing I want to say, cleaning, sucking it out, and punching through, mechanical rotting. What a lot of us think about when we talk about calling that plumber to clear out the roots in our lateral from the clean out in our basement. He's rotting it out, cutting it out. When we cut roots, the picture up in the upper right, it's tough to see. It's even tough on my better image here. That is it looks like a spiral wound piece of spring steel with teeth on the edges, and you're spinning it. There's a little motor on the end of that. With hydraulically, you're making the motor spin, which makes this root cutter spin, which you can send down the main line, and you've got an 8-inch cutter or a 10-inch cutter or a 12-inch cutter to cut out roots. You're just physically cutting them out. That's how you get rid of roots. Well, this one, for some reason, hold on. You guys are going to laugh at this. Back to the sucker truck. This one's a better one. This is an actual pipe, and it's very different looking, but it's over half full. This is in Milwaukee where our headquarters are. It's over half full. There was a 4-man crew, worked for weeks cleaning this line out by going in there with shovels and shoveling it to that back hose that I was referring to. The city couldn't figure out, all the lines were draining, but the whole thing wasn't draining. Well, it was 5% full, 10% full, decades later, because they hadn't done any cleaning, it's over half full. It's standing at about his shoulder. It's whatever. All right, what do other municipalities do? Some only react to backups, no question about it. There are communities that is their program. We got a problem, let's go solve it. Sometimes we don't know what all we do because we don't know what Broadview has in the way of capacity and staff and trucks. We know the ones that go out for to hire outside contractors. And there's about 4 of us in the greater metropolitan area that do roughly the same kind of work. We think we're better and smarter and cooler and all that. But there's about 4 of us that roughly have the same kinds of equipment and the same kinds of experience. A couple of examples. Flag Creek is the sanitary district that takes care of Westmont, Hinsdale, Clark Hills, and a couple others in that area. They don't do any televising of their sewers, which we're going to talk about in a second. But they have a 3-year contract. We didn't get the contract this year. We had it the last 3 years. 2 of our guys, one of our crews, was living in one of those areas 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, cleaning sewers. That's how they handled that need for manpower. They outsourced it, if that's the right way to say it. We were there 8 hours a day. I remember one time we pulled one of the guys off, let the single guy operate the jet truck, and we got in trouble because the contract says we got 2 guys on there. All right, fine, put the second guy in. That crew is then also on call if there's problem, backup of some sort. They're on call to do that. But that's the way Flat Creek chooses to handle it. That's a little unusual to have a cleaning only contract or a cleaning only program outsourced. Not internally. It's very logical to have a cleaning only process internally because it costs a lot more to have televising equipment than it does to have it's double the cost to have televising equipment. Riverside, Brooklyn, the Grange, just picking a few that I'm familiar with. Every year they spend they have a contract clean and televise 15 to 20,000 feet. They try to get a little bit chip away at it. I don't even know what the total size of those communities are, but that's a very typical way. It goes out for bid. 3 or 4 of us put a bid on it. We get it this time. We don't get it that time. Old Park is getting very aggressive. Ralph talked a little bit about it, and I told you about Old Park. All right. We clean sewers. Right? We cleaned them by hand. We cleaned them with a jet. We cleaned them we vac the stuff out. You took care of the individual. Now let's put a camera in there. Why should you do that? I'm sorry, when are you going to do that? You're going to do it like you're going to build a street, and you want to make sure before you put this new pavement down, that the system in place is in good shape below it, because pave the street and then have a break or have a problem is worse. You spend more money, and the residents get mad. They think the public works doesn't know what they're doing. After a new installation, to confirm, Belva's got a project out right now. They're replacing a whole lot of water main. That is the project. They're doing water main, and because they're laying this new water main, and they got to run new services from this house over here to that side of the street, from that house over there to the water main, and this crosses a storm sewer, and this crosses a sanitary sewer. They're drilling these things into place. They want to be sure they didn't punch through the storm or the sanitary process to do it. So there's a line item in that project. You've got about 5,000 feet of storm and about 5,000 feet of sanitary that you have to televise beforehand, so you know the condition. Televise it afterwards. Make sure you didn't make it any worse. The third bullet point there, complaints. Well, that's clear. You're going to televise if you got a problem, because you don't know. The guys that run the jet trucks, whether they do it like our guys 8 and 10 hours a day every single day, or once in a while guys, it's still blind. You can't see in that pipe. They got a good sense of the feel. They can't get anywhere where the jet goes. There must be a rock blockage. The best way to do it is put a camera in. That's pretty dirty. What you say? Yeah. Roots over there on the left. Debris piled up on the right. That's why you're doing it.
I'm sorry, Tom, can you go back to the picture? So on the left, that whitish area that we see on the side, the left side of that tunnel?
I think that's roots with some grease that's accumulated. Okay. That's what I think. But the interesting thing about our guys, and I'm sure others, they can spot these. They can tell me practically. They've been doing it for 20 years, and that's all they do. Sit at the TV truck and look at this. I can't tell half the time what they're looking at, but the experienced ones are pretty good at it. That's what I think that is. This is debris piled up, and I believe that's a dead fish in the foreground. I'm not sure. Here's six more of just what the bottom. You can't see the bottom left. Those the middle, and bottom right are the primary reason people end up televising, because they have to see if the sewers are bad enough. That a lining program would be logical. It's going to collapse shortly. We better do something about it. It isn't only to make sure the camera doesn't just say we cleaned it appropriately. The camera says structurally what's going on with my pipe. That's actually the more important reason to televise sewers. I'm not going to make an expert. I'm going to blow right through this, but there's several ways to do it. This is kind of a cool one. This is literally in the pipe. I don't picture the Broadview has too many 48, 60-inch diameter brick pipes, but it's kind of a cool picture. This is the primary CCTV, closed circuit televising, is what I'm talking about when I'm televising sewers. The guy's sitting in a truck. We call it the bread truck because it kind of looks that shape. He's got a monitor and a computer and a cable coming out the back connected to the camera, and the computer is recording what the camera is seeing. He's driving it with a joystick. It's great for a job point of view. I had a Nintendo forever. Now I can be a camera operator. And if you have an 8-inch pipe, or if you have a 24-inch pipe, your camera rig is going to be a little bit bigger, but it's all the same concept. Put the camera in the line and drive it down with a remote control. It's connected with a cable. It's not independent like a remote control car. It's connected by cable. Have your camera in the middle of as close to the middle of the line as you can, so that you can see as much of that 360 degrees as you can. If it goes underwater because there's a sag and you can't see anything, it doesn't do any good whatsoever. That's why you're televising. You got a jet over here, and the TV guy says, "Hey, we missed some stuff." He backs off. They're talking about walkie-talkies. The jet brings the jet up, pulls that stuff back down, and the TV guy drives on down. So you're working for 2 minutes in the same line. So this man hold that, and they get pretty good at it. If there's a sag, the vacuum of pulling that water through, the vacuum can pull the water out of that line, so that the camera can get through and capture 360. We've got some really big ones. We do a lot of big pipe. We've got some really big ones that weigh 300 pounds. And the guys laugh at me because I say, "Well, okay, just carry that over there." Yeah, you carry it. Sometimes you can pull it through. You just, with a wrench, and it's the same concept. Sometimes there's so much debris. Sorry, thank you. Jeez, don't turn the page. You can picture, this is the way that it used to be done This is the way that always was done back in the day. You just had a camera on a skid, and you just pulled it through with a hand winch or the motorized winch. Doesn't matter, you take the pictures. I'm going to skip these next two. Because they're not like, that is, and not to make you experts, but if we were hired to televise sewers in Broadview, you would end up with, the public works or the engineer, depending on who did it, would end up with a series of reports that look like that for every single line segment, and the details on there, there's way too much to bother to try to see up here, but it would say, we started at manhole 1, we went to manhole 2, and it was a total of 300 feet, and along the way, here's what we found. And then there's coding in there that is very uniform, so that it's always, so that theoretically, an engineer could read it and a public works guy could read it and understand the same thing. It's not subjective. Then it's kind of dirty. It has codes that say the crack is this, and it's circumferential, or it's longitudinal, or it's a partial lapse, and there's very standardized codes. And I had a book here, and I forgot to. It's our prop to make it's our prop to make the projector. Those stack of papers are right there. We did a project for Joliet, and those reports, it took that many pieces of paper. That's how many line segments we did. But there's one of those for every line segment, and the information itself is on DVDs. We can take that information and analyze it. Engineering firms can take that information and analyze it. I tell municipalities all the time, it doesn't do any good to televise if you don't at least review the video and have a game plan for fixing what you see. Otherwise, you just spent money that you didn't need to. Other than the occasional, oh good, we saw that the cleaning wasn't as good as it should have been. You're televising to look for potential problems and then have a plan to fix those potential problems in a budget sense and in a time sense. We don't care about all some of this. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I thought we talked about budget before, where Ralph said, what does this stuff cost? You need to see it. To hire a contractor like Vision Sewer to clean and televise your sewer lines could cost you this range, just to get something in your brains there. It could cost as little as a buck and a quarter, because everything is right down the middle of the street. There's very little flow. It's very clean. Doesn't take us very long at all. There's no traffic, and it's a perfect world. 300 feet, not very deep. Boom, 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 boom. We get it done, and it costs you a buck and a quarter to do it. It could also cost you $10 a foot to get it done. I have a quote right down into Lake Forest. Hoity-toityville, there's a storm line running in the backyards of these massive lots. We don't even know how we're going to get our equipment back there. But they need the storm line cleaned out, roots cut, cleaned out, and televised. It's going to cost them $9.95 a foot for a 2,000-foot stretch, because that much equipment is going to have to do what it's going to take to get it done. The variables, that backyards, is it in the backyards or is it in the middle of the street? We hate backyards in an older community because there's fences all over the place. I was looking at a job yesterday, I was telling my wife last night, looking at a job yesterday to see what it would cost for us to rehab it. I go to there's a storm line in the street, the storm structure. I got to go to the backyard. There's the point A to point B is back there. And I go to the back, there's the back of the house, and there's a German Shepherd right here. And he starts, and he's not tied up. And I just sort of went like this and back to it. So I have put on our own internal job sheets, there's a dog in such and such a yard, just be aware. Usually not a variable, but it's all a function of, everything's a function of time. The cost is a function of time, so how long is it going to take us? Is there a lot of traffic? It's on Roosevelt Road, and we have to work with IDOT and shut down traffic and push it all over there and have an extra guy that's a flagger. It's going to be a little more clean and televised than it is when it's right down in the middle of a residential street. How deep just makes it more complicated there. Why else might you have a backup?
Excuse me.
No problem.
So when it comes to pricing a job, say for example with the Village of Broadview, would we be looking at the possibility of certain streets, say the residential streets with not a lot of traffic and easy access, would be one price, and then perhaps somewhere in the industrial area where it's more curvy, there's more traffic and problems, would be another price?
No, what we probably would do, depending on how big the project, we'd average it out.
Okay.
We probably would not separate, we'd have to see, but we probably would not separate it. We would know ahead of time, as Ralph was saying, we would understand what you're asking, and it's exactly this, and we'd spend a lot of time out there pulling lids and seeing how deep and checking out the traffic, and seeing the routes and the truck traffic in the industrial areas, and we would decide it's going to take us X amount of time, divided by how many feet is X per foot, so probably not. Once in a while we do that. It's sanitary and storm can often go that way. The storm is going to be heavier debris loads and bigger pipe usually, on average. So it depends on what you want, truthfully. If we could get away with it, we would have price everything as time and materials. I mean, honestly, we have a better shot at making it out that way, but we're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. Little tiny projects, we're going to do it that way. That's the way we do it in Franklin Park. We work it a day at a time. But if you give me 2,000 to 3,000 feet and up to televise, you can ask for a linear foot price. That you got something solid. If we messed it up, we messed it up. And if you didn't tell me any of the variables, and I had to wing it, the price could be up here a little bit higher, naturally, because we're trying to. At the end of the day, we got to make a buck. I wanted to be sure that the industry phrase inflow and infiltration, the engineers talk this all the time. That is water that is in your system that shouldn't be. Inflow is directly goes in. It rains, it goes through the open holes in the sanitary sewer lid, and it drops in. That's inflow. Infiltration, it drops into the ground, works its way through to the crack in the pipe, and goes into or a cross connection that we were talking about earlier. That is the single biggest cause of excess water in the sewer system, is inflow and infiltration, as a general phrase. The smaller ones here, we talked about those before, sump pumps and roof filters. All right, I want to do this real quick. There are other ways. You put a camera in the ground, that's one way. That's the major way you find the condition of your sanitary sewer system, but there's other ways as well. Westchester just 2010, so was it August of 2010 when that horrible rain was in Westchester and Hillside, particularly where
July.
I assume you guys were too. The Westchester, then not too long afterwards, came out with a RFP that they want to smoke test 264,000 feet of sanitary sewer in their system to find out what the hell all this excess water is going there. They didn't choose to televise it. I don't know if I agree with that, but they chose to do it this way. What smoke testing does is, the picture is worth converting 1,000 words. There's a sewer plug that has been put in the line that you can't see that's underneath that fake pavement there to keep you're dumping smoke into that manhole. Put it this way. You're dumping smoke into that manhole, and you're blocking the two ends so it has to stay inside that one line segment. You pump it in there, it's a chemical smoke, it's not real smoke, it's just a chemical smoke to make the air visible. And you put it under a little bit of pressure and it flows down the line, and then it does, guess what? It goes out wherever it can because it's under pressure. So it pops up through a crack in the ground, you got a broken pipe. It's kind of sort of like the leak detection that Ralph was talking about. Send it up through the roof drain, the vent stack in the house, something's wrong. Something's connected wrong. There's a trap that's not full, something's wrong. That's a way to get a good sense of what's going on in terms of connections.
Now, with a smoke test, just logic tells me that it's going to tell you if there's a leak in the sewer pipe, but it's not going to tell you if there's a blockage.
Oh, absolutely right.
Okay.
It's all about where the water's coming in, nothing to do with why the water's not going out.
So is a smoke test more helpful, for example, as you mentioned, when you have a smoke coming up in someone's home or out someone's chimney or something like that? Would that indicate that there's some sort of problem with the...
It might tell you that there's some pump is connected into the sanitary system where it shouldn't be. Because when you pushed the smoke into the sanitary line, it went through the connection line and up in the person's basement, and that's a problem.
But we as a municipality wouldn't know that unless we were in the basement watching the smoke come up.
True enough, or you get the call. And the way, this is not.
Oh my God, my
Absolutely. This
drain
is not
pipe is
casual.
smoking, yeah.
You don't take these programs lightly. The fire department is aware of what's going on. You pass out notices a week ahead of time to every single person on the block. We will be in the next week, and you pass them out the night before. We will. Here's what the smoke is made, the chemical aspect of the smoke. It's not going to hurt you, but don't stick your face in that sump pump crock and breathe it in for an hour and a half. We did a project up in Barrington, and the guys told the record one time was 10 people called the fire department. You see smoke in your house, you're going to panic. But it's a valid way of finding out if you've got connections that shouldn't be done into the sanitary system. And in Westchester's case, they were trying to find anything they could do to figure out why all this water is not going away. Sorry, where are we going? One more. The last place, or the next most logical place to spend municipal money is, there's a line, and a manhole and a line in between. A lot of times we just televise the lines and forget to look at the structures themselves. They can be old, crappy structures, and a lot of water can be coming in there. And it's excess water is what this whole program is about, what this whole concept of cleaning and televising is all about, trying to keep that water out of the system. Here's a couple of logical pictures. The water dripping in the upper left. It took a little brick manhole, very typical little brick manhole. There's one more way. Municipalities don't do this all that often. You're trying to see if the storm lines are leaky and water's ending up in the sanitary system when they're separated, not when they're combined. They're combined. So you dump green water. There, in case I don't know where this is, but there's a storm and a sanitary line on this map running right close to each other, down the middle of the street. You fill the storm sewer there, that little drawing, you fill it with green water, put a camera in the sanitary sewer system, and see if green water appears in the sanitary system. It's real simple. It's real low tech. But you do that once you have an idea that that's what's going on. You don't do it as a regular routine sort of basis. And I think we just about did. When we cannot become experts in this, but the other thing, the other half of what Vision does, this is on a Vision sales pitch. This is there are solutions out there as a sales pitch. Cured in place lining is one way to take care of old pipe. You put a liner in there, put heat to it, add to it, and now you've created a new pipe inside the pipe. Many municipalities do this on a very regular basis. Westchester had a street program last year, and there was $800 and some thousand worth of lining as part of that street project. I know that one because we did it as the sub to the general contractor. That's a very interesting process that Hancock knows about because they put it on there. That your engineer, I'm sorry, that all the consultants know about. It's pricey, but it's not digging it up, and it's getting structure back as well as taking the leaks out of there. You can either do it as a standalone, and a lot of communities do it. We are just going to line this stuff, or you stick it as part of a street project. Section liners, you do a little short version. Maybe you're putting a device in that line, and you're grouting those bad joints. You're pushing a chemical grout, just kind of like caulking it from the inside. There is a process out there in the industry, we don't do it, but there's a process. You foam, you close off like a smoke detection, you close off the two sides of that manhole, from manhole to manhole, and you put a chemical foam in there, and it's killing the roots. It's as simple as that. The guys that do that know, will tell you it's not that simple. I'm sure there's more chemistry involved than I know. But it's a very valid way of getting rid of roots on a fairly permanent basis, because it kills the roots. It doesn't just cut them off like we would do. And then we also have a process, and others do, to take those old brick structures and you spray a liner in there and you get some structure back, or you keep excess water from coming in. I've now made you guys sewer rehab experts.
I got a quick question. You mentioned earlier that gas by using the gas, you could detect a crack in the system. But which is an option as opposed to
the smoke? You said yeah. Okay. I wouldn't recommend filling your system with gas.
Yeah, right. Well, smoke, if there's a crack in the system, it's going to come out. Would the camera pick up the crack?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm wondering, you smoke detector back, camera detector back, you almost need to do both.
I would, if I had the choice, I would put a camera in there with an experienced operator. He's going to see it, and the smoke would be overkill in that particular scenario.
But you also mentioned earlier that by doing both the jetting and the camera, that doubles the price. Now,
Closing, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So, the first time you say a community like Broadview, first time you come to a community like Broadview, you go with both the camera and the jetting to determine if any trouble spots you have. If we brought you back in 2, 3, 4 years to do that same section, we don't need the camera, we can just negotiate the jetting price.
I would say yeah, that's possible.
So it's not locked in stone.
No, not at all, not at all. If you asked us to come in only televised, flip it around, I would fight you. I would say, please, pay me just a little bit more, because I got 2 guys anyway. Pay me a little bit more to bring that jet truck out, because if we get in there with a camera and we have a blockage,
Yeah.
you're not getting anywhere. I'm done. So, our offices in Bridgeview, they hire us all the time to televise. Don't worry, we'll have our jet truck there. They have to bring their jet truck every time.
But as a citizen, actually, I know a little bit of the history of the sewer system in Broadview. We did indeed at one time have a jetter truck.
Yeah.
And we were capable of both jetting and sucking the material out. It got into a state of disrepair. They shut it down, never got it back, never got it rolling again. So our current public works director, somebody informed him that our current street sweeper can be retrofitted to be a jetter. Now,
Jetter or sucker?
Sucker. Now, that may be, in his mind, adequate. It's just not good enough. I want to see
It'll be the same thing in Broadview.
and professional employees operating this thing. And I would like for you at CNP, I was looking for our public works here. Well, I'd like for you to get with Trustee Marino and possibly make a presentation before the entire board, because what we're doing now is not good enough for me.
It's small. That's
It's just not.
this big.
No.
Yeah, and at that point, if I did that, I would be prepared with things I don't even know, cubic feet per minute of the suction power, and gallons per minute of water that can go through, and all the very meaningful things. A lot of times plumbers will say they're jet guys because they got this little big trailer thing, and they got 200 or 300 gallons of water that can generate 100 PSI of pressure, and it's good enough for some things. We're talking 2,000 pounds of pressure to scour that stuff, to cut through grease, put on a nozzle that spins and it breaks the grease off of that line.
That's a question
No.
you use. You talk about grease, and I think about restaurants that are pouring grease down and so forth. What would be your recommendation if we have restaurants operating that could be actually doing just that in the clog, and we're not really aware of it until something else happens? Should that area be more?
It should absolutely
more
be.
frequently?
Yeah, but more importantly, those restaurants, if they were anywhere close to code, they all have grease traps.
Yeah.
I don't know that they do, but I'm certain that they're supposed to. And my recommendation would be that the municipality spend time figuring out ways to enforce rules and regs about those grease traps. That there are guys that do nothing but clean grease out of them. And then you hire those grease guys every 2 months or 6 months or 12 months or whatever is logical, that your capacity of that actual grease trap, you've gone from a mostly pancake restaurant to a deep fried restaurant, it should have been bigger now, or it needs to be bigger now. And I'm learning this only because it obviously touches a lot of what we do. There are communities and there are wastewater agencies that have full-time people that inspect and make sure that that's done to code. But the code's got to be right to begin with, or got to be well structured to begin with. So to answer your question, kind of, sort of, if we're we're asked to put a bid together to do some televising in this area of town, and we know there's a lot of restaurants, it's going to cost us more because we're going to have some grease in the line. If it's an apartment complex, then there's just that many more people there that don't really care because they're apartments. I mean, not that they don't really care, that's not what I mean. There's a possibility there's going to be more grease in the line. I was in Stringwood. A lift station is a big device that gravity takes the sewer from here to here, but eventually you run out of space, so you got to lift it up and start over for the next run on the way to the treatment plant. That's called a lift station. I have never seen so much grease in one structure. It was disgusting. The thing was 10 feet in diameter, and it had come down to a 6-foot diameter opening with a shelf of grease around there. And there's 2 restaurants up there, he told me.
That's the name of your company,
Visual Sewer, right on.
And you have any known by anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. So Power Rod, that would be one of your competitors?
Yeah, National Power Rod.
Yeah.
They've been around longer than we have, but not by much. Pardon me?
Been around forever.
Yeah.
Well, in this area, there's probably just 3 or 4. There aren't a lot of companies.
No, that's true. That's true. National Power Rod is a place called Sheridan Plain, that most of those are former Power Rod guys, that they're based in the southwestern suburbs. Those are the 3 big ones, and there's a couple little overgrown ones, overgrown plumbers.
Now, in Broadview, we have storm sewers in certain areas of town, mainly basically in the Harvester area, which I know you don't know what that means, but in other words, south of the tracks. Beverly, which is also south of the tracks, and our industrial area.
Okay.
We have
probably newer areas.
a little bit, yeah. We have combined sewers in the bulk of the residential area of Broadview, basically from the tracks to the Eisenhower and 9th Avenue to 25th. Is it appropriate to take a different approach to the areas that have combined sewers? In other words, as we're deciding how much of Broadview we need to immediately clean, jet, and televise, would we be better off approaching it from starting with the combined sewers? Or is it just as important to do the combined and as well as the separate sanitary and storm?
I think it's important, just as important to do them both, and it's going to cost you more to clean the combined than it is going to be to clean the sanitary. Because we're going to bring a sucker truck out to clean this combined, because there's going to be more material in there. Because you have the sanitary material and the storm debris. And it's going to be bigger pipe generally, not always, but generally speaking. So I think they're of equal importance. But if you truly are fighting for dollars, then the sanitary is going to be a little bit less per foot, per whatever, and maybe that's where you start.
Now, there are a number of people that I've spoken with in that area that I'm talking about, where it's all combined sewers, who have experienced flooding, and including some people in this room, who've experienced flooding not only when we have the big, Hurricane Ike coming through in 2008 or the big 2010 flood, but when we have the sudden big bursts of rain. Can you talk a little bit about how this would impact, or how a clogged sewer would impact the residents' homes? Why some areas may be getting flooded when others aren't?
Sure. I mean, it's common sense if you think about it. The pipe is this big, and maybe it's undersized, and maybe it's perfectly sized for the proverbial 100-year rain event. That's what engineers will often talk about. So you have a pipe that has a fixed amount of volume. You cannot put more water than X in that pipe. No matter where it comes from, it can't be any more than that. So if it's sanitary and it's a Saturday and everybody's home and the things are flushing in showers and dishwashers, so you've now taken up more than on a Tuesday when some people are at work. And then it rains like hell for 24 hours. And it finds its way in the street, off the street, because you don't want it on the street, in there. And then the flaws that we talked about, the finding, you get all those places to fill that up, and there is just no other place for that water to go. Now you add blockages to that, roots. Now it doesn't flow either. So it's a storage situation, so to speak, and it's a flow situation. And then with the MWRD on the big end, if they start to fill up, it all, goes backwards. The only place to go is up your lateral and in your basement. It's just, I don't mean to minimize it, because it's a horrible thing to happen.
It certainly is.
But it is a very common thing to happen. I mean, it's very easy to understand how come it happens with all the places that water can get into the system. So if you clean and televise and rehab those things that you can fix, whether it's lighting or digging up and replacing, you have an increase.
Or just cleaning it thoroughly.
Yeah, I understand.
With the root cutter and
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Clean it thoroughly,
Right.
and televising, you find the problem areas and you fix them in certain ways. Some you're digging up, some you're putting these liners in. You've now maximized the capacity of that fixed volume of space. I guess is the way simplest way I can think to say it.
Can I ask one quick question? After listening to you, Tom, I have been here about 22, 23 years now, and I don't remember ever getting mail from different companies like I have in the last couple of years regarding, do I want to buy some...
Sewer lateral?
Yes. And it gets me nervous. I think I even brought it up to your attention last year because I thought, well, why all of a sudden are we
Because
getting this?
NICORs and the gas companies have to, they're doing, they're covering their backside. They've been punching through laterals as they drill, as they send gas lines in an area. They do it directionally, what they call directional drilling, and they punch through your lateral, and they went, we got a lateral.
Yeah, because they specify what I am going to have to cover versus what.
I think, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I've got them at home myself. I live out in Aurora.
Yeah.
I know, I've been
Okay.
tempted. I just think it's somebody's, they said, laterals are a pain because if they break, it's a problem.
Yeah.
The municipality owns up to here and you own that and you got to replace that. That's $10,000 or $6,000 or
Yeah.
whatever it is. It's a lot of money. I think it's, I don't mean to say it's a scheme. I don't mean it in a negative sense. I think it's a way to make, for a third party to make some money.
Okay.
And you might be better off doing that.
Well, I've never had that in all these years, and all of a sudden I'm getting those
Well,
things.
Ralph said it earlier about water main breaks, and I'd say about sewer. They don't fix themselves. They don't get younger. That's the
Yeah.
other way to look at
Yeah.
that same thing.
I have a question. You had mentioned that, what do you call that, the
This jetter thing?
the jetter, okay. It's 2,000 square
2,000 PSI.
PSI, okay. Is that the strongest, I mean, the most pressure? Is that the standard, or is that like mild, or is that the best?
Yeah, that's standard on most of the trucks. You get too much pressure, and you can break the pipe.
Okay.
Yeah, you can. Those laterals that we just talking, they're all connected into that sanitary line.
Okay.
And if they're not connected very well, and if we have the pressure up too high or too much water, therefore, we can shoot it up that lateral, and it comes out your toilet. That's really fun. We clean those up. That's on our time. We didn't do anything wrong, but
That's
Okay. Now, I had one other comment I wanted to ask, because I wanted to make sure I understood what John Neely was asking. That we do our own, the village does its own jetting, is that right? So how do we know what pressure that we're cleaning, that we're jetting? Do we have any clue?
yeah, first of all, I don't think Broadview does very much of their own cleaning. Just me talking here without.
Okay, I don't know, I'm just saying.
I'm hoping that any responsible public works department who has purchased equipment from so-and-so jet truck guys have got the training. And on top of that, there's an organization that I was going to give Judy some information on that has lots and lots of information about how to be a jet operator. It's a national organization that is designed for that reason. I would hope that they would be part of that. So I don't know that.
Okay,
but
that's something I'll ask our public works.
If they have too small of a piece of equipment, they're not getting the power and
Okay,
velocity.
I'll ask them. I think what I'll do is I'll take the trip and ask them.
You mentioned something about qualifications to do that, like organization, the jetters.
Yeah, there's a group called NASCO, National Association of Sewer Service Companies. I had it here, I kind of blew right by it. I don't want, you guys are not becoming jet operator experts, but.
Just was curious.
No, National Association of Sewer Service Companies, and I hope that our recommendation, if you hire people like us, that you only hire people like us that have had every one of them. Went too fast. There you go. That second bullet point, whatever it is, PACP certification. Pipeline Assessment and Certification Program is, NASCO is trying to standardize how to clean, how to inspect, how to do the work that's underground.
Okay.
And we subscribe to it. We hope that everybody else subscribes to it. We have people on our staff that are certified trainers, so they would train any individual that wanted to be. It's just a way of raising the standards in the industry so that that question that comes in is gone away. If you hire a company, you're getting the right stuff, and then a responsible public works guy will make sure his guys match the same thing.
Okay, and that's a question, that's a vital question to ask them, and
Sure.
I will ask them. Okay.
And I'm sorry, Tom, what did the PACP stand for?
Further down, the third, or whatever, pipeline assessment and certification program.
Okay, pipeline, I'm sorry, what?
Assessment and certification program.
Okay.
It's boring to know about all the details, but it tries to teach people how to be a better TV operator and how to be a better job.
Oh, okay.
And it seems basic because it seems like you're just sticking a thing in the ground and pushing water through it. But like anything else, it's mostly science and some art. You want to try to keep that to the... I talked to Lon's Ralph and I apologize. It's much later than I wanted to be here today. I really appreciate you guys having the interest of this.
And you'd be willing to come back to a board meeting to do this again?
Anything you want.
Okay.
Anything you want. I don't exactly know what Judy's railroaded us into doing on Monday. If we're doing a presentation, if we're just there, let me ask you that.
Well, a lot of that's going to depend on how the board accepts you. I would hope that you'd be able to just give a very brief presentation, not slideshow and what have you, and see if they have any questions.
Okay.
So, I do have a question. When you televise the sewers, you showed us the report that we get. Is there also a recording of the televising itself?
Yep, there's DVDs. Back in the day it was VHS tapes, now it's DVDs that matches.
Okay, that's what you meant by that.
And if you couldn't get a report without it.
Mm-hmm.
It would be better to have a video, no report.
Right.
But the report helps you find the video real quick.
Okay.
A lot of times we'll find municipalities that televise because they want to see what's going on and they didn't bother to record it. What the heck?
Okay, are there any other questions for Tom about our sewer cleaning and televising and what have you?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I really, and Tom and Ralph both, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
And everyone here should come back on Monday then, Judy, I think, all the people here. Yeah.
Okay, the last thing that I wanted to touch on this afternoon is paying for all of this. And not only all of this in terms of the testing, but also paying for the repairs and ongoing maintenance and what have you. As I mentioned earlier, the premise behind the 5-year plan was that we would be selling between $8 and $12 million in bonds. I do have concerns, and I voiced some of them at the last meeting, and I'll be voicing them again at this meeting, because at this next meeting on Monday, we're going to be taking a vote about hiring the underwriter and also about the engineering contract. I am concerned about the approach that's being taken so far in terms of our selling these bonds, and I do want to just share a couple of facts to give you an idea of what my concerns are with this. At the presentation at the last village board meeting, I asked the prospective underwriter if he had any idea or if he had done any kind of workup as to what our debt service would be under the different scenarios. If we were talking about selling 8 million, 10 million, 12 million. And he did give us these numbers from his projection. And obviously these are subject to change depending on exactly what our interest rate's going to be. Are they going to be 20-year bonds or 25-year, those type of variables. But what we're looking at is a debt service, and by debt service I mean the principal and interest payments that we would have to make each year, of between $625,000 and just over $1 million a year. And what we're saying is that we will be paying for these bonds out of our water and sewer revenue. What that means is, regardless of whatever else happens in terms of increases in our cost of water from the city of Chicago, any kind of catastrophic problems, increases in other types of costs, because our water and sewer fund includes the salaries for the people who are doing work with our water and sewer. It includes all of our emergency repairs. It includes other types of costs like the liability insurance and what have you. So there's a number of different things that can go up, not just the cost of water. Right now, according to our finance director, we are showing on an average basis roughly $800,000 a year in excess revenue in our water and sewer fund based on the prices that we have now. So we're looking to maintain about that same kind of an average, even though your water rates went up, because the water rate increase that we just experienced in March was a dollar for dollar increase based on the city of Chicago's increase. Okay? My concern with this is that we would end up committing ourselves for the next 20 years to spending every penny that we have right now, plus some, because we're going to have to show a cushion. In other words, we can't just say, for example, if our payment is $10 a year, we can't just show that we have $10 to make that payment. We have to show that we have the $10 plus at least 25% additional revenue. As it stands right now, if we were to sell the $10 million in bonds, where we're looking at a debt service of about $850,000 a year, we will have to increase our water and sewer rates, just to maintain that, to be able to qualify and maintain that debt service. That wouldn't allow us to put any more money into a reserve without increasing our water and sewer costs. Now, the other way to increase our excess revenue each year, one way is to increase our revenue. In other words, to increase the water and sewer fees that we charge. The other way is to decrease our costs, or decrease our expenses. One of the reasons that I wanted to do this today, and do this quickly, get it before the board and before the public, is because my belief is by doing this type of testing, by proactively finding out exactly where our water main leaks are, we're going to be spending less money on the unaccounted for water loss, the water that we're buying from the city of Chicago through the Joint Water Agency that's just going into the ground or back into the sewer. Also, by being proactive, we would be able to get a better price on the repairs that are being made, and we would be more proactive with it, so we're be able to reduce our overall maintenance expenses moving forward. Now, what all of this means, and what I wanted to get across today, my first concern is what the effect is going to be on the people of Broadview in terms of our expense of water moving forward if we sell the bonds as they were presented to us, number one. But the fact is, even though we've accumulated almost $3 million, or roughly $3 million in cash in our water and sewer fund today, and that's a lot of money. And that's why I've been concerned that we haven't had a capital projects plan, some way, what are we going to do with the money we've been accumulating? So I'm glad that we're addressing this and we're talking about this now. But that's not a lot of money when you're looking at the overall infrastructure costs. It's not enough to take care of all the problems that we're going to find, in looking at our water mains and sewer lines. And certainly not when it comes to digging them up and replacing the streets. We probably will have to look to some other revenue source or some other source of funds in order to be able to really address our infrastructure. My concern is we have not yet exhausted all of the other options in terms of where we can draw from for this money. And what I mean by that, for example, there's a number of different federal and state grant programs. As we've all seen in the news, President Obama has dedicated considerable amounts of money for infrastructure programs. The initial money that was released for that has all been taken up. They're talking about doing that again. There's other types of programs aside from that, through the Illinois EPA, through the Illinois Finance Authority. There's also different types of low-cost or low-interest loan programs where we're not actually selling securities. Because when we sell bonds, because if we're borrowing money from a bank or borrowing money from the state or some type of a program like that, they don't need the same type of protections that we do if we're selling bonds, because what we're doing is selling it to the general public. So there's protections in place by the Securities and Exchange Commission to protect the ultimate bond purchasers. And all of that increases the actual cost of borrowing. So I'd like us as a village to examine the grant programs, the loan programs, and then if we do decide that we do have to sell bonds, and we may end up having to do that, I'd like us to also explore some of these other options, like, for example, the Illinois Finance Authority, which is, it used to be there was a lot of different agencies that all had their loan and grant and different type of financing programs. A couple of years ago, Illinois consolidated it into one agency, and that's the Illinois Finance Authority. So my point being that there are a lot of different financing options out there, and we need, as a village, we need to be exploring all of them.
Judy, what are our bonds rated at right now, and who are the bondholders? Because what the bond is worth today may not have the same value at the point in time that the village is going to try to sell those bonds. What is the rating?
Well, there's a couple of different questions in there.
That he wants to sell.
Okay. There's a couple of different questions in there. First of all, our overall rating, if you just pull up the Broadview rating on our bonds, is AAA. But it's AAA because we purchased bond insurance. There's another rating that's given, it's called an underlying rating or SPUR rating, and our SPUR rating is BBB minus, which is the high end of junk bond status. And that's because of the various different financial problems we've experienced over the years and problems with the pension fund, what have you. Now, in the presentation that was given by the underwriter at the last board meeting, one of the things that I asked him about, generally speaking, and what he is suggesting is that the bonds that we would sell for those 5-year plan would be revenue bonds, where we're only pledging the revenue from our water and sewer fund. And I asked him, traditionally, if we make them revenue bonds where we pledge the water and sewer fund and general obligation, which means we will pledge the entire full faith and credit of the village of Broadview. Essentially, we will increase property taxes or whatever the revenue source is in order to repay these. When you do that, it's looked at as additional collateral, and generally you get a better rate and better terms. At the time, Mr. Coyne said that he was a little bit concerned and thought we would be better off not including the general obligation because of all the problems and because of that rating. And he seemed to feel reasonably confident that if we only focused on the revenue bonds, strictly on the water and sewer fund as our source, we would be able to avoid the impact of the negative rating, the bad ratings and problems that we've had. So he seems to think that before insurance, we would be able to get it into the A's, whether it's single A, and he's got different numbers, A3, A2, you know, that type of thing. But that was his projection and his strategy with this.
Judy, to get 10 million, we would have to have 11 million issued. More bonds, because as I understand it, we need 10% to cover the debt service for the first. Whatever I could hear from Mr. Coyne's presentation, I thought it wouldn't just be 10 million to do the work, we would need another million, 10% of whatever, right, to have up there to secure.
Right. What she's talking about is that if they are strictly revenue bonds, we're required to maintain a 10% of the bond sale, 10%, and I just had the word as you were talking, in a reserve account.
Yes, a reserve account.
So yes,
okay.
And then, but it's not only the 10% into the reserve account, but there's also the various different expenses
right,
that are paid out of proceeds.
Okay, here's my comment as a citizen. I would like to know, you know, if there are grant programs, if there are loan programs, if the bonds, I heard what he said about the bonds, and I understand, you know, who wants to pay, you know, $1 million for 20 years or $800,000 for 25. I understand the mortgage scenario and all of that. As a citizen, I want to understand the whole ramification of this project, before we go forward with it. I'm all for fixing up our infrastructure, but I think like they recommended, and I will say this to anyone, you know, they recommend to, when I say they, the trustees have recommended, our building person has recommended, Commissioner Upshur to the residents, you need 3 bids out there when you're doing work in your home. Why not have lots of different ideas come to the table so that we as a community can decide what is best and how much we can pay, and we know what we're going to pay and have some idea. I think that's the whole gist of why I'm here. I'd like to understand. I may not agree, but I want to understand before voting on stuff.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That is exactly the point that I'm making in terms of the financing.
And I don't want to interject hearsay, but as a trustee in conversations that you all may have had, have anybody questioned why we would just be looking at one person that was presented to us? Have any other trustees questioned why would we have another person come before the board and discuss what they can do in terms of selling these bonds? Have that been
Another on the right.
I don't remember anyone else asking that last at the last board meeting. It was a question that I raised. There was another trustee who asked how we found this underwriter, because we have another underwriter that we've been working with for many years. So that question did come up, but one of the things that I had asked when we were speaking with the underwriter at the last board meeting, I said, wouldn't it be more advantageous to the village if we were, because right now what we're being asked to do as a board in approving this underwriter is entering into an agreement with him so he has the authority to go out and shop with the investors and see what kind of package he can put together. Then he would come back to the board and say, this is the interest rate, these are the terms, this is what you have to show in terms of additional revenue, you know, the cushion, that kind of thing. And I said, wouldn't we as a village be better off if we did the same thing with a couple of underwriters and had a couple of people come back and give us the presentation? And he felt that it would muddy the waters in a way, you know, make it less attractive to certain investors if they think that we're shopping around.
Well,
that was his response.
If these are junk bonds, we're not going to get that much money off of them.
Well, right now, as I said, the underlying rating, the rating before insurance of the bonds that we have right now that are already outstanding is BBB minus. Which is the top end of junk bond status. He seems to feel that by focusing strictly on the water and sewer revenue, we would be able to get a higher rating than that, where it's not junk bond. Yes.
On the table, at the March 19th meeting, when Mr. Coyne made his presentation, the ordinance on the you know, that you all were voting for, was that just to give him the authority to go out and investigate what he could get, not a commitment to bonds or loans or whatever? That was just an approval to say, go out and investigate what's out there. Is that my understanding?
That is my understanding of it, and how it was being presented.
Okay, okay, let me just say this. If that was the case, as a citizen, I don't mind hearing what you come up with. But then I'd like to have an ordinance on the table to say what grant programs are out there, what loan programs are out there, what other ways of raising revenue, so that we have the total picture that's out there. And you know what, that may have happened, but I don't know that because I haven't heard anything, and I'd like to.
And for that matter, as I said, from the research that I've done over the past couple of weeks, looking at the Illinois Finance Authority, they also have bond programs, but at a more like a 1.5% to 2% interest rate with lower costs, because they're not looking to make a profit the same way that a traditional underwriter would. So to me, I absolutely agree that we need at the same time to be exploring what our options are in terms of grants and other types of loans. But I think we also need to look at some of the other options in terms of bonds.
That's fine, I have no problem with that. I'm all for laying it out there and where we can get the best price and for our money. I think that makes sense because we've got a lot of work to do and a few dollars to do it with.
That's right.
And hopefully we'll get there. I'm optimistic that we will.
And I am too. I am too.
I have a question.
Yes.
For example, we as a citizens, can we look for another person, another bank or something? But we cannot present just like that. We have to go through the trustees or in order to get a presentation.
Well, and the question is, can we as citizens look at other bond options, and or would it need to be the trustees who initiate that? Is that your question?
Maybe, or we as a citizen
Okay.
directly.
Well, I'll tell you my thoughts on this, and especially after talking with Mr. Coyne. There are a number of people that I would like to speak with, including the representative from George K. Baum, which is the underwriter we've been working with, and including people from the Illinois Finance Authority, just in terms of bonds, what our options would be, and possibly even other underwriters. But personally, I would like to speak with both of those. I haven't at this point for two reasons. First of all, when Mr. Coyne, and I don't want to hold myself out as any kind of an expert when it comes to bonds and the best way to handle municipal securities and what all of our options are in that. I've spent quite a bit of time over the last 4 years studying and learning about bonds because of our village's previous sale and because of the rollover bonds. But when Mr. Coyne was saying that there are some new rules in place where it used to be that, from what I took from what he was saying, that it used to be that anyone could start shopping around and talking to investors, but then you end up with situations where someone could walk around and say, I want to see if I can sell some bonds for Broadview without Broadview even knowing about it. So now they have to be authorized in order to speak for us. So that's the first reason. I don't know enough. I didn't know enough personally to have the confidence to say I, as a trustee, on my own, can start negotiating and talking to people.
No, not
Right.
negotiating. It's only to look for another bank or credit union. Maybe they can give us a loan.
Right.
For that.
Right, and when it comes to various different types of lenders too, absolutely.
Better conditions.
I'm hoping, first of all, that the rest of the board will take the time to watch the presentation, take the time to listen to what I'm saying, if any of you speak with them, either outside the meeting or at the meeting, and give this more thought, where we as a village can officially talk to some of these other people and find out officially what our options are. Without doing it as a village and as a board and in an organized way, I can do my research and I can make a few phone calls and talk to various people and say, have you dealt with this agency or that? Look at the actual bond issues and loans that have been granted in some of the different programs. But I'm not going to be able to get the specifics of exactly what Broadview is eligible for. And I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly. I think any of us could certainly pick up the phone and call various people and get some information. But in order to really know what our options are, we have to do it as a village. Because there's certain information that's going to have to be released and negotiated.
Well, we can bring the people and that people speak with all the trustees and that's the point.
Yeah, yes, we could invite other people to come and talk to the board and give presentations. I do know that would be possible.
I think what a lot of other villages do is that they have subcommittees that are made up of their residents. And these residents do exactly what you say. And then they make a proposal and they submit it to the board to review and to vote upon. But as we operate today, it doesn't work that way. The board via the mayor makes a selection the trustees, they vote on it, and then it becomes a law or a way of doing things. And I think it would be to our advantage going forward, because as you look at our surrounding villages or neighbors, the growth that is occurring very rapidly, and we're not growing at all economically or retail, and possibly we could even lose some of the industrial businesses that we have because other communities are becoming much more aggressive in offering other deals. But if you look at, Oak Park has a very good plan in place in terms of involving their residents in the operating of the business. And I wish we could get to that, because one person can only do so much. You can do more with 2 extra hands, 2 extra feet, so forth and so on. But they have a very good plan as how they involve their residents. And their residents take a very active part in village government, something that we do not do. And we have a lot of qualified and experienced people here in the community that could better assist if they were given the option. And by being a chair of a committee such as you are, and setting up committees, if we had tried it before in the past, but just let's go ahead and do it. You might not win this battle today, but there's going to be a lot more battles down the road. And if we don't start positioning ourselves, we're going to be talking from one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting. So with what you said, I'm in full agreement with that, and that's something that we seriously need to start doing, but we're going to have to probably do it through the particular committee chair or trustee chair, however that's going to operate, in order for what you just said to happen, or any other area in which we are going to have to start reviewing and analyzing and getting things in motion.
And we're going a little bit off of the topic of just today with the water and sewer bonds and that, but very good point.
I just also like to say that, I would like to see us do this as look at exploring things as a village, as was asked. And one thing that I'm going to do that I don't do often now, I'm going to email the trustees my concern, and I'm going to be here to ask for other options. I think it's great. I'm all for what we're doing, and I think everybody is too. But I think that, to be honest with you, I want to say this because I'm tired of the animosity that I see in the presentations of what goes on. And sometimes, Judy, it might be the way you might phrase things, and I think you and I had this conversation personally about it, but still, to me, that crap has got to go. I'm here to tell you, what I want is a village that everybody is asking questions. Let's get in here with the hands on. Let's do the work we need to do. And I know they're working hard, but they can't do it all. So we've got other opportunities, and that's all I want to see. And so I intend to email everybody, and I'm going to go over and see Matt Ames, if I can, tomorrow, and ask about the jetting and seeing what's happening. Because you know what? We're working hard. But let's see if we can work together, work smarter, I think. So that's all I have to say.
So you think that this one is a better Broadview? If it's for our community well-being?
Well, we can get there. We can get there as a group.
I'm not giving up.
I've said this for years. I'm very optimistic about our opportunities in Broadview. We have resources that a lot of other communities don't have.
Right.
In terms of development possibility, our industrial area, et cetera. We've got a lot going for us, and I'm very optimistic about what we can do, what we can accomplish.
That's all. Thank you.
Now, we went over, but I think we've covered some very good, very important ground here today. Thank you all so much for coming, for participating.
Thank you for this,
asking
very
questions.
informative.
Thank you again, Ralph Gross and Tom Woods.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you coming so much and the time that you're taking
Very informative.
to let us know what our options are.